happy to welcome Sister Spit, who've been on tour, just coming to us from Seattle, originated in San Francisco. Michelle T. and Cindy Anderson sort of launched Sister Spit in '92 in San Francisco. I toured with them in '98. So let's give a warm, greener welcome to Sister Spit.
Which is the nonprofit that now oversees Sister Spit. I'm also the MC for the show. I usually tell a lot of ridiculous, weird stories about the strange things we've experienced, but I'm going to save most of that for this evening show so that we can have a lot of time to talk with the artists and do a Q&A and talk about their process and stuff. But yeah, to sort of introduce the kind of context of Sister Spit. It began in the 90s. The first tour was the first ever tour was 1997. And Sister Spit has always been about like queer, outsider, feminist, literary experiences. And you're gonna actually see a trailer in a second that I feel like really contextualizes kind of the history of Sister Spit. This trailer is for an upcoming documentary made by the artist Topiary. So take it away.
Spectacle. What are you doing here? Do you realize you're in a poetry meeting? This is crazy.
All these incredible word-oriented artists.
Yeah, we are 12 queer women traveling across the country from San Francisco.
It was like being in the bathtub was the most amazing thing.
Like a whirlwind.
Getting to go on the road with my friends for 6 weeks and perform every night.
Edgy, punk rock.
This pile of crazy dykes, girls and boys and
Writers, performers, poets,
people in bands.
female performers who have in common a sort of outsider perspective, whether that is because they're queer, the kind of queer they are, because of their class background.
You know, it's just us on the road doing what we did. We did it at home, but why not do it on the road?
It's a girls' alternative literary movement. It's that. It's all over the country, and that's big news.
Incidentally, this is a story about Jimmy, who's a he-she sailor, a woman passing as a man in the Navy, and it's not about me.
Crazy, it was a little anything goes.
It wasn't just about writing, though, it was about venting. Give the finger to the man.
Lesbians were tame, and dykes were feral.
These guys, who looks kind of like me, with this facial hair on, who has the biggest smile, which I'm sure none of you do, and the mind's about this fucking big. It's at my hotel room right now. Don't you want to wear it?
I think it just busted in. A bunch of women showed up.
You want to see my dog's name?
A coke and a smoke as we roam the great prairie. What sentiment do I want to express at the end of our world? Its many eyes, America the Hydra, the milky stuffed beast, the roast beef sandwich of America. America, what shitty parents you were. We have to run away again and again. We keep coming back to see if you missed us, but you didn't even know we were gone.
How many of you have ever heard of outsider lit? Yeah, totally. And I think that again, like sort of pin that theme of like outsiderness. And as we go into the Q&A, we can kind of really talk about that. But I think that what you kind of can see here is like there's this alternative, this outside perspective of even already sort of liminal politics, which is really interesting. So you're going to see that a lot on the lineup tonight. Michelle T currently curates the Sister Spit lineup and has for many years, and she has an eye to kind of artists who are interested in critiquing from within their own identity. So we're going to have conversations up here about feminism or queerness that are maybe a little bit outside of what you expect from that narrative. And I do a lot of fat activism, and I like to kind of, you're going to see some stuff. You're going to see some. But excitingly, we have an unprecedented act on the tour with us, and that is a children's book. As you kind of have seen, like there's a lot of like dick references, a lot of like maybe nudity, not so much nudity on our tour, but last night we were in Vancouver and I did get like a cute boy to come and like serve me a dick donut while like, and then hold my glove for me and then lick the Bavarian cream off my glove. That was like pretty scandalous. There was no nudity, but but that was fun. So we have a children's book on the tour. What's exciting about Sister Spit is that as the kind of tour has grown, as we've kind of established ourselves, we were approached by City Lights bookstore and publishers in San Francisco. Anybody ever been to City Lights before? Yes. So you may not know that they not only sell books, they also publish books. They publish a lot of the beats, and they still publish a lot of really incredible work. And we have an imprint with them called City Lights Sister Spit. And every year they publish about 2 of our manuscripts. And this year one of the manuscripts was Rad American Women A to Z, which is a children's book and is amazing. And I'm going to actually let Kate Schatz, the author, and Miriam Kleinstall, the illustrator, tell you a little bit more and read from their book. So please welcome them.
Hi everybody. Wow, you guys are so far away up there. Hello, I can see you. And then you guys are so close. It's an amazing room. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Kate Schatz, and I am the writer of Rad American Women A to Z. It is my first children's book, as well as City Lights and Sister Spit's first children's book, and the first children's book for our illustrator, Miriam Kleinstall, who is right there. Wave, Miriam. And I know Miriam through Miranda Mellis. So this event today is a nice coming together of all these things. So thank you, Miranda, for helping us make acquaintances. And I got the idea for this book when my daughter was about 2 years old, and she is now 5 3/4. She's right there. You're wondering, that's Ivy, so if you're wondering why there's an incredibly small student in here, that's her. I will be whisking her out of the room immediately following my presentation, and then we'll be returning for the Q&A. So, this is the family-friendly portion. So this book is an A to Z of rad American women from history who've done awesome things with a focus on women whose stories are not normally told, and the women who aren't normally in the history books, and the names that not many people know. So I wanted to, if you're seeing them kind of flash behind me here with some footage, I'm going to read to you our entry for J. I've been trying to read different ones on the tour, so I'm going to read J, and then Miranda is going to read one of our special entries. So in our book, J is for Jovita Idar, and Jovita Idar is someone I was not familiar with when I started the research for this book, and when I read about her, I knew I wanted to include her. So J is for Jovita Idar, who believed in free and equal education for all children. Jovita Idar was many things during her lifetime, including a nurse, a journalist, an editor, and a political activist. She was also a teacher who believed that all children had the right to a good education, no matter how much money their parents had or what language they spoke. Jovita, the oldest of the 8 children, was born in 1885 in Laredo, Texas, a town on the Texas-Mexico border. Her father ran a newspaper called La Crónica that published articles in Spanish, many of which spoke out against the prejudice experienced by the Idars and many other families who were Mexican and Tejano, which is Texans of Spanish and Mexican heritage. Jovita wrote for the paper, but she also wanted to be a teacher. At 17, she got her teaching credential and began to teach in Los Ojuelos, a tiny town on the border not far from Laredo. Her students were poor, and the school was in terrible shape. It had no heat, no textbooks, and not enough desks and chairs. Jovita asked for more funding for her school, but the education leaders in Texas refused to listen to her. Poor Mexican American students were not a priority for them. This made Jovita furious, but it also inspired her to take action. Mexican children in Texas need an education, she said. There is no other means to do it but ourselves. She organized a group of women called La Liga Femenil Mexicanista, the Mexican Feminist League. They taught poor children and adults how to read and write and created bilingual lessons to be used in schools. They also opened new schools, including one in Los Abuelos that had heat and textbooks. These schools were free and open to all children, and they were the first bilingual schools in Texas. And that wasn't all Jovita did. After she published an article that criticized President Woodrow Wilson for sending soldiers to the US-Mexico border, the Texas Rangers showed up at the newspaper office to try to shut it down. Jovita stood in the doorway to block them from entering and to defend her freedom of speech. And it's not in here, but they actually returned the next day and burned down the entire print shop, but she continued to publish even after that happened. Soon after that, her father passed away, and Jovita took over La Crónica as the head editor-in-chief. She spent many more years as a courageous and influential journalist in Texas. And that was the story of Jovita. And because these are very brief biographies that are intended to be just a jumping off point for readers, I didn't even mention a lot of the other things she did. She was also a nurse, and she founded the White Cross, and they crossed the border to assist soldiers during the Mexican Revolution. And she has an incredible story. So hopefully readers will want to learn more about her and look her up. And now I have a guest reader. In this book, X is for the women whose names we don't know. And that's both because it's really hard to find names that start with X, but also we felt that that would be a powerful thing to do. And as we did the research for this book, we realized how many stories there are that can't fit in the book and that we also just don't know. So here's Miranda Mellis, our guest reader.
X is for the women whose names we don't know. It's for the women we haven't learned about yet and the women whose stories we will never read. X is for the women whose voices weren't heard, for the women who aren't in the history books or the halls of fame or on postage stamps and coins, for the women who didn't get credit for their ideas and inventions, who couldn't own property or sign their own names, the women who weren't taught to read or write but managed to communicate anyway, who weren't allowed to work but still supported their families, or who worked all day but weren't paid as much as the men. X is for the radical histories that didn't get recorded. X is for our mothers, our matriarchs, our ancestors, the nurses and neighbors and aunties and teachers, the women who made huge changes and the women who made dinner. X is for the hands that built and shared and wrote and fought, the bodies that birthed and worked and strained to keep going, the feet that walked, ran, jumped, and balanced, the minds that dreamed and desired, the hearts that loved. X is also for all that's happening now and all that is still to come. X is for the women in homes and offices and fields and labs and classrooms who invent and transform and build and create. X is for all we don't know about the past, but X is also for the future. X marks the spot where we stand today. What will you do to make the world rad?
Thank you, Miranda. And so that is Rad American Women A to Z. Unfortunately, we don't have any books for sale today because we sold out of them, which is a good problem to have, but I wish we had books for you. We do have some sweet merch, though, including tote bags for all of your textbooks and other items, and buttons and patches and stickers. So that's that. Thank you so much.
Yes, we have so much sweet merch for you. I am so excited to introduce our next performer, Micah Sigourney, who is otherwise known as Vivian Forevermore, and who holds a weekly party that I think he'll talk about in a minute in San Francisco. If you're ever there, you should check it out. And claim to fame was once recognized by the New York Times as N1 drag queen. Please welcome Micah Sigourney.
choose to sit in the back for some reason? Is that like a political thing? Okay. We just got off, whatever. I'm just gonna read this fucking poem. The smell of leather. I smell the leather. I slept on the couch that my roommate claims is real leather. It's not real leather. When it was delivered, there was a scrape down the side of the couch with cotton or polyfill coming out. Oh fuck, I forgot this really important thing I have to tell you before I start this poem. I know that sounds like cute and charming, but it's really a problem. So there's a word, whenever I perform this on colleges, a lot of people come up to me afterwards and ask me what this word means, and it's kind of important to the poem. The word is naugahyde. Does anyone out there know what naugahyde is? 1, 2. So you're like 40? Yeah. Cool. So naugahyde it's like pleather or vinyl. It's what you would sit on in a diner or in a Pinto. So that's what naugahyde is. This is getting me some trouble. Okay, so naugahyde. We all clear? Yeah. Anyone need more explanation? This is really eating into my 8 minutes. The smell of leather. I smell the leather. I slept on the couch that my roommate claims is real leather. It's not real leather. When it was delivered, there was a scrape down the side of the couch with cotton or polyfill coming out of it. Naugahyde. Naugahyde. When I was little, I wanted to name my cat Genuine Leather. Naugahyde. Naugahyde. The couch is sturdy, big, and black. You could crawl up on the back of it, the headrest part, and get fucked easy. It's that sturdy. Wide enough to lay out on top of or half hop up like a dog would. Jerk-off couches. Jerk-off couches from the 90s. Jerk-off couches from a jerk-off parlor from the 90s. We've seen these couches in porn. We all have. These are the couches the roommate bought for too much money, second-hand, because he was told they were genuine leather. If you spill food or soda on them, it wipes clean. Real easy. You can take one of those prefabricated disposable wet bleach wipes to it, and it's fine. Naugahyde. Naugahyde. Each armrest could fit 8 cups of coffee. It's that big. I slept with my headphones in when I slept on the couch. I slept with my headphones in. It was that thing when you sort of sleep, but you really aren't sleeping, and you catch yourself grinding your teeth, and you realize you weren't that far gone anyway, with all the sounds of the street working its way into the spaces between the thoughts your mind weekly sifts when you aren't sleeping. I slept with my headphones in, listening to a TED Talk, so I could get inspired, so I could learn about inspiration. When we got the couches, the first week, no one was home, so I invited a guy over to have sex with me on the couches. Naugahyde. Naugahyde. 2 of us, pretty big gay men, could throw each other around. That's how big the couches are. And choke each other and piss on each other because that's how big they are. And they wipe clean and spit in each other's mouths, come everywhere. Naugahyde. Naugahyde. I kept leaving to the kitchen to get water, and by water I mean whiskey, and by whiskey I mean vodka, and by vodka I mean gin. I kept leaving for gin and washing my mouth out with water after. His hair was receding, this man. He took off his glasses so they wouldn't get knocked off by the athletic sex he had promised me. When he came in the front door, I remember thinking to myself, I'm glad no one is home to meet him. He's ugly. The smell of leather, not real leather. The couch where I sleep when no one is home smells like my saliva instead. Naugahyde. Naugahyde. When my father was 10, he used to lie on real cows, on their necks when they castrated them, on farms. He'd lay there so they wouldn't jump up and run away or swing their big skulls around like big hammers, breaking shins or their own heads. The bulls were macho, brave studs, he said. But after they seemed weak and small, like they shrank or something. You can't ask my father what they did with the balls afterwards. He can't remember. You can't ask my father. He can't remember. I asked my father, but he can't remember. I lay on the couch and watch Hulu and eat beef ball soup when I'm sick. And when I say sick, I mean when I'm hungover. My neck sweats in the backs of my arms because the couch is fake leather. Naugahyde. Naugahyde. The roommate won't let animals on the couches because he fears they will scratch the genuine leather. I'm not a fan of animals anyway. The unexpectedness of their claws, the way they don't seem to discern enough about personality or attractiveness, they don't seem to discern enough about coolness, about danger, the danger of eating chocolate or eating chicken bones, the danger of grinding your teeth. I want to talk to you about animals! I want to talk to you about animals! I want to talk to you about animals sitting on leather couches, which is really like animals sitting on top of other animals! When I was a kid, my mother had all these real sheepskin rugs that you weren't allowed to walk on. So we would pick them up, put them on our heads, and pretend to be Indians before Indians was a bad word. We didn't know, but we were really pretending to be savages, which has always been a bad word. They say Indians use all of a buffalo when they kill it, but I'm not the least bit native. I don't have time for old buffaloes. You can't take a bleach cloth to buffalo hides. Naugahyde. Naugahyde. When I was 16, though, I found a dead swan on the side of the road. I put it in the trunk of my mother's green Outback and brought it home, cut off its wings and lit a candle, rubbed salt on the nubs of the bone where the wings attached to the body. I cried a little, got salt in my eye. It was harder than I thought to remove the wings from the body. I stored them in the garage in cedar wood chips to keep the bugs away. I can't stop thinking about those couches and their straight backs and their firm armrests. I can't stop thinking about them like the backs of animals, the backs of genuine leather animals. Very modern cattle, hunched close to the painted wood floors in the living room, huddled together. I don't know if animals huddle together or just people huddle together. Naugahyde, Naugahyde, Naugahyde. Thank you. I'm just a dude yelling at a room full of people. Sister Spit feminism. So this, I have an identical twin brother. You're welcome. Super cool. To answer your first question, he is also queer. To answer your second question, we have not slept together. Just haven't been offered the right amount of money for it yet. My brother and I wrote poems to each other for 3 months last year in an effort to constantly edit and re-edit and kind of wreck each other's writings so that we could come up with something different and new, and also erase ownership. So this is a book we made together that's on the merch table. I'm going to read some poems from here, and first I'll read the end of the introduction, which is, sure, this booklet touches conceptually on themes of identity, repetition, ownership, geography, but it's really the linguistic mapping of difference and distance between two men who love each other differently than love is used as a word usually. Does anyone here not know who David Wojnarowicz is? That's enough people. Okay, so David Wojnarowicz was this rad queer artist who was making art in New York when AIDS happened, the AIDS epidemic, first and second wave, I think, and all of his friends died, and then he died, and it sucked. So this is for him. It's called David W. 1. New York. I remember New York. AIDS was new. I don't have to say more to you than New York. A cheap pizza place on St. Mark's and First, that CVS at 4th above the subway stop, Lexington and 71st. The supermarket is small and expensive. In New York, David wrote a book about AIDS. It was an accident, the book. He was dying from AIDS. He wrote, he died. Central Park, empty benches, bare in the winter. You know the rivers, east and west. You know the financial district. It's just a list. Broadway, Times Square, MTV Studios, Saturday Night Live. I haven't told you anything about David. About AIDS. New York. I want you to know about AIDS. The first wave. Words like skin and ideas like metaphor fail. David tried art. He was good. He wrote. His friends died one by one and en masse. Then he died after he wrote. I never met him. I try to be clear about all of it, metaphorically, in the skin. AIDS, I mean New York, I mean decimate. There is something here about not meeting him or me, some grand idea that could be uncovered. I can't though. You get it. 2. My friends are getting AIDS, I mean HIV in San Francisco now. I mean, my friends aren't or weren't Coit Tower, the Castro, Dolores Park, Golden Gate, Folsom. My friends now are getting HIV here in the Mission, Soma, 6th Street in Atoma, Buchanan or not. They're getting HIV here. I mean, my friends, in December, it's warmer than October. My friends, I mean HIV. Long weekend festivals, Monday nights at the clinics. I am not David. My friends do not die one by one or en masse. I am not angry about it. They get it. AIDS. I mean HIV. I mean bragging. They get it. There's something there, something bigger than just my friends are getting AIDS. I mean HIV. I mean San Francisco now. 3. There's a woman who lives on the street outside my building. Every day her face is swollen from beatings. I've seen her give an old white guy in a tattered Navy trench a hand job. I've seen her yell at men who try to touch her. I've seen her sleep, and I've seen her drool in her sleep. I borrowed her to show you San Francisco, to show you, David Wanarovich, I know something about something too. I'll just read one more, and it's really short. It's called Cocaine. I feel like I have to explain what that is because I explained what Nalgahide is. It's from the 70s. It makes you into the coolest person ever, and all your friends will love you. Cocaine. I want to cuddle, puddle against the corner. Coagulated, they say. Boots. No, booths. About sex. Sex booths. Dilated pupils and people. I go for the art. The music, the dust, makes me regular. My regular isn't regular like daily, like nothing special, like every hour on the hour. Puddle dale, milkshake on the counter, contour, steel wool. No washing your dick in the sink, the mirror sign declares, like a Southern belle, because they do declare, not about dicks, usually about Southern things, Southern dicks. I make jokes about women. Jokes about women. I'm a feminist. Women jokes hurt women's feelings less because I'm a feminist. All women should be feminists. I can say it because I am a feminist. With a northern dick. A declarative I statement dick. A dick I talk about in poems about dicks because I am a man poet. Men poets never talk about their own dicks. Ever! I'm edgy. Feminist tendencies. Cavalier dick talk, don't you think? Dicks. Cuz.
Yes, we have we've had so much fun on this tour. And we've like taken dicks and cuddles, it's like our rallying cry now. Our next performer is named Tom Show. He hails from Melbourne, Australia. He wrote a book of short fictions called Look Who's Morphing, which was released to acclaim in Australia and has since been acquired by a North American publisher, Arsenal Pulp Press. And he'll be reading from Look Who's Morphing. So please welcome Tom.
Hi everyone, thanks for your support. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Chinese Whispers. I know a game called Chinese Whispers. How to play Chinese Whispers. One person whispers something to the person next to them. The receiver then whispers what the first person said to a third person. This third person whispers the message to a fourth person, and the message is passed on in this way until all the players have heard the message. The object is to see how much the message will change along the way. I know a game called Chinese Whispers. How to play Chinese Whispers. One person whispers something to a receiver. The message is passed on until all the players have heard the message in Chinese. The object is to change the message to Chinese. I know a game called Chinese Whispers. How to play Chinese Whispers. One person whispers something to a receiver. The message is passed on until all the players have become Chinese. The object is to see how much the people will change along the way. So that's an excerpt from my piece, Chinese Whispers. This book is all about identity and transformation, and so you can see different sort of identitarian transformations already in that piece, and also sort of linguistic transformations. I realised that there's this piece in my book that I had not read during this tour and that I could have. So in this book there's a whole series of pieces that are based on popular films, such as The Sound of Music, Dirty Dancing, The Bodyguard. And this piece is sort of based on the film The Exorcist. And the only thing you need to know about this piece is that there's an Australian reference in here to the Australia Council, which is Australia's federal arts funding body, like the National Endowment for the Arts. I think that's the US version. Okay, so this piece is called The Exorcist. There are some blood red credits on a black background, and then the opening scene appears, and this shows Auntie Wei and me drinking beers in a crowded bar in the city. Auntie Wei is only on her first beer, but her face is already flushed. She looks deep into my eyes and tells me that she has a head for business and a body for sin, just like Melanie Griffith's character in the film Working Girl. The thing is, although I'm not that close to Auntie Wei, I feel that what she said is not really the truth at all. I even feel like telling Auntie Wei how things really are, which would involve saying, actually Auntie, you have a head for surly customer service and a body for lactose intolerance. But instead I buy her another beer. Half an hour later, we're at a novelty store on Swanson Street, and Auntie Wei is buying one of those aprons that has fake plastic breasts attached. And it's then that I realise that you can take the auntie out of China, but you can't take the alcohol intolerance out of the auntie. I warned my auntie that the breasts on the apron will look very fake on her because the breasts look so obviously made out of plastic. However, Auntie Wei is more concerned that the breasts on the apron will look very fake on her because they are of Caucasian skin tone. At any rate, Auntie Wei insists on wearing the breast apron straight away. As we walk to the train station to catch the train back to my place, I notice that Auntie Wei's wearing of the breast apron is causing other people to see her differently. It's as if other people see her as someone else. I eventually notice that Auntie Wei is not quite acting like herself anyway. At first, I think that this is a classic case of clothes make the man, but aprons with fake plastic breasts make him act a little differently. But I soon realise that it all goes much further than this. In fact, by the time we've arrived at my place, things have become much stranger, and Auntie Wei's head is spinning around and around the full 360 degrees. And she's projectile vomiting all over my lounge. She vomits all over the handmade rug and all over the leather three-seater sofa and all over the walls. This change in Auntie Wei is when it disturbs me. Over the years, I've never really felt that I knew Auntie Wei, and it seems to me that her behaviour is only proving this point. Then again, I'm aware that she and I have really made the effort to get to know each other more deeply. I take a deep breath and I think about raising all of this with Auntie Wei, but her eyes glow red and she says to me in a deep voice, "We hate you. Fuck you, 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 fuck you. We hate you. Oh yes, we hate you." I briefly wonder why Auntie Wei has started using the royal we. But she in fact has a head for swearing and a body for demonic possession. At first this realisation gives me a sense of relief. Since demonic possession means that Auntie Wei has, in a sense, become someone else, perhaps this means that I do know my auntie better than I had thought. It also occurs to me that I must rescue Auntie Wei from her demonic possession. I say, "Who are you, and what have you done with the real Auntie Wei?" But Auntie Wei only laughs and lies back on the vomit-splattered couch. Her body soon starts levitating into the air. She also starts talking in different voices. At first, a guttural-sounding swearing voice, then a childlike pleading voice, then a deep and booming voice talking in biblical language, and even a puppy-like voice of barking and growling, but then whining and whimpering. Then Auntie Wei shocks me by suddenly talking in a voice that sounds just like mine. In fact, she soon begins to speak in various voices of mine. At first, a softly spoken voice greeting me hello, then a mumbling voice making awkward small talk, then a soothing and fatherly voice offering me protection, and even a confident and business-like voice quoting from successful arts funding applications that I have written. I spent a little while listening to these and other voices of myself, as spoken by Auntie Wei. I also began wondering if, demonic possession aside, my auntie may have the capacity to understand me far better than I ever thought. However, when Auntie Wei goes on to say, as indicated by the project timeline, see timing section below, by the time the proposed funded period would commence, work on the project will be more advanced and I would then be in a position to more significantly benefit from Australian Council funding. I realise that her demonic possession has gone too far and that it must be stopped. I run to the study and get a crucifix from my bottom desk drawer. I run back into the lounge room, yell at my auntie, "I banish you forever, you devil," and hold the crucifix up to her. But Auntie Wei only grabs the crucifix from me and begins masturbating with it, and as she rubs it against her crotch, she declares, "My work on this collection demonstrates that I am capable of 1. Producing a body of short works that are thematically linked, and 2. Working productively with the assistance of arts funding support." As she begins saying this, a new realisation occurs to me. In order to remove the demon from Auntie Wei, the breast apron must be removed from her body. As I know that this is a job that must be left to the experts, I call an ambulance. Around 10 minutes later, an ambulance arrives. The paramedics are very professional. They manage to grab hold of Auntie Wei and put her into the ambulance as she vomits and curses and masturbates and continues to quote from my successful arts funding applications. Auntie Wei is taken to the hospital in the ambulance while I follow behind in my car. She's wheeled into the operating theatre straight away while I sit in the waiting room. It takes a team of 12 surgeons almost 15 hours to remove the breast apron from Auntie Wei, but once they do, the demon is banished from her body. I spend the night at the hospital pacing the corridor and reading tabloid magazines, and I wait until the doctors tell me that it's okay for Auntie Wei to spend a brief amount of time with visitors. So I go to her room and see her lying on the bed, tired but awake. It turns out that Auntie Wei has no memory of what's happened. She says to me, "I hope I didn't cause you too much trouble." I pause for a moment, and then I break the awkward silence by replying, "Actually, Auntie, I've always felt that you're one of my favourite relatives, and I respect you very much. And although we've never known each other very well, I just want you to know how important you are to me." And I hold her hand, and we smile at each other, and thus a potentially problematic situation diffuses into a nice family moment. A family moment that makes me feel much closer to Auntie Wei than usual. I stay at her bedside and we talk for a while longer. However, after about 15 minutes, I can see that Auntie Wei is becoming tired, so I hug her and I promise that I'll be back to visit tomorrow. As I leave the room, I look at her for a moment. She's smiling at me. At the entrance to the hospital, I pause at the top of the stairs. I have a solemn look on my face. I then turn away from the hospital and walk into the distance. The music of tubular bells is playing, and then there's a blood red title on a black background that appears, and this closing title says, "The Exorcist." Thanks very much.
That's the first time Tom's read that on the tour, so that's why we're laughing uproariously. Also, we're very sleepy. All right, so I'm going to actually do my little bit here. Are you ready, Jerry Lee? Okay. P.S. Jerry Lee's our driver and tech person. He's the best. He's also accepting tips for coffee. All right. You did?
It's alma mater.
I didn't know that. Okay.
This building's named after him.
Obviously. Yeah, so to give a little bit of context, I actually do a lot of university talks about body image and diet culture, and I'm academically trained to talk about these things from like a like a critical intersectional approach. But what's interesting is that it sometimes veers into the arena of like motivational speaking, which I don't feel comfortable with. But sometimes it goes there because people have so many issues around shame around their body and they want tools. So it's like I want to give them the tools, but I also don't want to reinforce like narratives of self-help because they're victim blaming narratives in a lot of ways. But anyway, this is me kind of making fun of the inspirational speaking industrial complex and also a little bit making fun of myself. Okay. My name is Virgie Tovar, and I was recently asked to give a TED Talk on the harmful effects of diet culture. Let's begin, as we always do here in the TED Talk family, with a real empirical understanding of what it is we're dealing with. Diet culture is a sophisticated system, blah, blah, patriarchy and control, blah, blah, white supremacy, blah, blah, sexism and the co-optation of health rhetoric to create a uniform and ideal Anglo-inspired body, blah, blah. Don't allow others to dictate the worth of your body, blah, blah, pizza is good. Now that we understand what we're really dealing with here, let me tell you a little bit about my story. There was a time in my life where I felt I must bow to the social expectations of weight loss and subject myself to daily visits to the scale. When faced with the expectation to lose weight, one must recognize that self-monitoring, as in weighing oneself, is part of a system of surveillance promoted by the prison industrial complex. When faced with a stifling reality of such an oppressive imperative, I recommend wearing the tightest thing you own and also fucking all the people who also hate being policed. We all know about the paleo diet, the flexitarian diet, the Atkins diet, the South Beach diet, Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, Richard Simmons, the more of Jesus, less of me diet, which advocates that if there's more of Jesus in you, there's less room for food. But I'd like to endorse a new diet of my own creation. The No More Douche Bro diet. In which I pursue avoidance, strenuous avoidance of people with stupefying levels of privilege 7 days a week. There are no free days on the No More Douche Bro diet. And also carefully moderate the consumption of foods that remind me of white supremacy, like cronuts, craft beer, horchata lattes, tacos fried with rendered duck fat, really just anything in rendered duck fat, artisanal chicken and waffles. This diet, I am pleased to report, has improved my cardiovascular health immensely. Did you know that dieting has been around for a very, very long time? Men like Sylvester Graham, the inventor of the graham cracker, and John Kellogg, the co-inventor of Kellogg's cornflakes, were early advocates of moderating food as a way of curbing immoral tendencies. That is, masturbation. Dr. Kellogg advocated for the consumption of cornflakes as part of a bland diet meant to curb sexual desire. At his sanatorium, he prescribed them to his patients and recommended that if oral administration did not sufficiently curb impure thoughts, that the cornflakes ought to be administered anally through enema. This is real. In the 1700s, Reverend Graham advocated for the aggressive circumcision of children if caught masturbating. He recommended removal of the foreskin such that erections would be painful for life. And for those with a clitoris caught masturbating, he recommended the administration of pure carbolic acid. Yes, quite horrifying indeed. And we can begin to see the connection between the ruining of one's genitals and dieting. These men were part of the dietary reform movement. This is where we get some of our current vocabulary around food as good or bad, and the consumers of, say, vegetables as good, and the consumers of, say, hot dogs as bad. Well, I like my clitoris. And to Dr. Kellogg and Reverend Graham, I say, newsflash, putting things up people's asses doesn't make them less likely to have impure desires. Some people might say, but Virgie, what about hell? To which I say, thank you, friend, for your earnest concerns. Wow. Thank God you're here. To carry out the agenda of body policing me through the seemingly innocuous vocabulary of arbitrary state-sanctioned standards of appropriate citizenship, will you be a total doll and forward the Department of Public Health my address so they can send me a check for $25,000 so that I can take a health-focused vacation to a place that doesn't have you in it? And doesn't use the police force to murder its citizens, isn't trying to defraud thousands of people through the rhetoric of education, doesn't use health rhetoric to oppress me. Here's my address, boo. There's been a growing number of people with cellulite, fat rolls, stretch marks, and jiggly thighs wearing two-piece bathing suits of late. They are called fatkinis. And these fatkini wearers advocate the idea that all one needs in order to have a beach body is a beach and a body. Do you agree with such a radical prospect? Yeah, excellent. Recently, I was interviewed regarding this very topic by NPR, and some white man whose name I can't remember asked me, so, you're telling me that you believe that the war on obesity is a propaganda-based campaign that targets women, people of color, poor people, and that this war uses public money to sanction the Anglo body as the ideal citizen by controlling people's relationship to food and movement, things they need to survive? He asked skeptically. To which I said, to paraphrase, girl, yes. You may have heard of BMI, the Burgers and Milkshake Index. This index is the most known accurate metric to quantify worthwhile life pursuits. In conclusion, it turns out that when you relinquish daily visits to the scale, cease calorie counting and thinking obsessively about how many crackers you ate or whether certain items of clothing make you look fat, you find that your schedule becomes quite filled with genuinely enthralling things, like getting photographed while floating on a pink donut as you read Miss Piggy's Guide to Life, while thousands of admiring onlookers gaze upon your succulent babeliness. In closing, I'd like to let you know that for the admirer, the enthusiast, I open my jiggly arms to you, and to the skeptic, nay, the fatphobe, I say, stop being such a fucking asshole. And is sometimes mistaken for a white chick, and has written Wish You Were Me, Sweatsuits of the Damned, as well as Painting painting their portraits in winter. Please welcome Miriam Gerba.
I'm going to start with 2 unpublished poems. A feminist found poem via a California small-town movie theater marquee. Get Hard, Insurgent Cinderella. Suggestion. White people would be better if they weren't. Now I'm going to read some poems from Wish You Were Me. Latin Tempora. When Dad was little, he thought the song went, secret Asian man, secret Asian man. America did spawn a secret Asian man. Fred Korematsu, a dude of Japanese descent, refused to be imprisoned in internment camps FDR set up. Korematsu went undercover as a Mexican. He got captured. Sticky rice gave him away. Mexicans don't like rice sticky, just their weed and balls. Cheeto Fairy. Tiny orange footprints across my desk calendar means she was here. Things that turn better when you add a ling. Hasid, hasidling. Ling, ling ling. Earthling, earthlingling. Ding-a-ling, ding-a-ling-ling. Ding-a-ling-ling, ding-a-ling-ling-ling. Language is make-believe. There's a special name for guys who are attracted to funny women. Faggots. Wish you were me. I don't write fiction because I'm sick of the lies. I'm sticking to memoir. In memoir, I can tell the truth. I can tell the truth about my modeling days in Milan. I can tell the truth about how I eat yellow cake for every meal, but my leggings still fit me like MC Hammer pants. And I'm so tall. I'm always helping the short people I love grab stuff off that shelf. In their kitchen cupboards, it seems like I'm the only one tall enough to reach. And I can do this kneeling. On the floor, go-go gadget arms. That's how long I am. And my skin is so perfect. don't have pores. I don't sweat. My vagina is made of a plasticky material. They based Barbies off of mine. I don't tell people that often. You're lucky. The last thing I'm gonna read is from a book of short stories called How Some Abuelitas Keep Their Chicana Granddaughters Still While Painting Their Portraits in Winter. And this piece that I'm going to read about half of is called Hummers. You can't spell swan without dick. These birds have been acting out since ancient times. The Greek gods took their form to rape girls and did this because the swan lifestyle inspired them. It's a form of divine thug life. Recently in Chicago, a gang of swans flipped a man's kayak and aquatically jumped him. 5 of them held him underwater until he quit struggling, and then their feather fingers let go, and they watched him float to the surface. The most King Kong among them opened his wings like a post-fight cholo boasting, "That's right, that's right, that's what's up, bitch." Swans aren't the only animals that should have been kept off the ark. Bigfoot was intentionally kept off the ark. Noah and his family worried about having a cryptozoological creature with such big feet on board. You know what they say about hard-to-find monsters with big feet. Their feet stink extra badly. On Noah's Ark, they had dolphins, sea monkeys, and clams. They had calamari and canned tuna. Noah's wife brought Miracle Whip, and when the tuna behaved badly, Noah flashed them the pseudo-mayo and raised an eyebrow to remind them of his family's tuna salad recipe. It's a good thing Noah decided to save the clams. Otherwise, the world would have no women. Clams usually get their periods around age 12. They lull in the ocean and then the water they live in takes on a cherry Kool-Aid hue, and the clams are ready for feminine products. Their monthly excretions enrich the water. They make it salty and tangy, like a glass of Clamato. Clams are disembodied private parts. Some are hairy, others are smooth, some have hard shells, and others don't mind the barnacles growing all over them. According to high schoolers, monkeys are the worst. Having sex with one will give you AIDS. According to many 16-year-olds, AIDS comes from monkey sex, which these teeny boppers will tell you is sex with an ugly person, not necessarily somebody with monkey DNA. The DNA can be human, the face pure lemur. Some stray cats are into masturbating on women's doorsteps. It makes them giggle to cat cum on a lady's welcome mat. A lot of animals rape. Dolphins They listened to screeches and hissing until it bordered on hell sounds. The college students ran outside, but only saw asphalt and cheap sedans under the parking lot lamps and moonlight. No warring cats. They listened and heard feral noises coming from their left. They followed the pavement down to the edge of the first floor and turned left again. They stood on their side of a cinder block fence and knew they were near the sound makers. They looked up to the roof of a shed with dried pine needles creating a highly flammable mattress. The friends saw a male raccoon wearing a little rapist mask, holding down a female of his species. She was squealing. He was holding onto her furry shoulders and plowing her with fury. Her opera-gloved hands flailed, and she lurched forward, trying to escape, disrupting needles, but her rapist had the gift of tenacity. The lesbian college student felt terrible. It felt terrible to be in the moonlight, looking at the profile of a small mammalian rape victim, and her friend screamed, "Stop!" at the male raccoon. Yeah, the girl echoed, "Stop!" The gay bent over, reached for a pine cone, and pitched it at the rapist. It struck his side, he let go of his quarry, and she bolted away. The gay whispered, "Do you know what the scientific name for raccoon is?" "What?" asked the lesbian. "Procyon lotor." "That sounds like another word for rapist," said the lesbian. The friends felt shaken, not stirred by the nature they'd seen. The lesbian went on to have other horrible experiences with animals. Once, a rabbit made love to her leg. That wasn't so bad.
Okay, so we've come to the Q&A portion of the afternoon. While people come up here and get their chairs ready, start percolating on a question so there's not like that mandatory 2 minutes of awkward silence. Let's just bypass that altogether, friends. Is anyone ready with a question? Okay, great. I don't know, should I guess, can you just yell it? Is
Yeah,
that
I
okay?
can yell it.
Okay, great.
This is a question for anyone of you. You all have such wonderful, unique styles of speaking your work. I was just wondering how those individual styles came to be for you.
So the question is about speaking styles and how we decided, sort of chose to take those on, or how we took those on. Well, I feel like mine's really low-hanging fruit. So like I grew up on the speech and debate team, and also as a Sunday school teacher. So I have a lot of my aesthetic is Pentecostal, and also very can. It's kind of this combination of like proselytizing, like deeply canned proselytizing. That's and like overdone to kind of. I mean, it just felt really. When I first thought of doing the TED Talk, I thought about doing it in that like pseudo-academic way that TED Talkers do, where it's like, I'm an expert. I'm being completely earnest right now. I just really want to help spread empiricism. And I think like it's just so stupid to me, like the Western project of empiricism as like an inherently worthwhile project is absurd. And so I just wanted to draw attention to the absurdity of all that.
I'm not sure if you're talking about performing style or about writing style, but I can answer in terms of writing style maybe more. I studied at an undergraduate level creative writing, and then I did a PhD in creative writing too. In my creative writing, my bachelor degree, I was really drilled in the maxim of show don't tell, which I'm sure all of you know about, which is a very common sort of maxim in creative writing pedagogy. And as a result, I feel that show don't tell, and this is not really only just my opinion, but it polarizes to sort of styles of narration. And one is like this idea that this is equated with success, that you adopt a very restrained sort of style with a very impersonal kind of narrator. And I found that this style is very kind of commonly sort of churned out by, I think, a lot of undergraduate creative writing students, and also to be found in a lot of literary journals, as sort of quite a sort of a depersonalized sort of style of narration. And then the sort of contrast to that is a kind of style of narration that is equated more with failure, which is kind of like being deemed, you know, as sort of too intrusive on the part of the author, too personal. And so, you know, I could never have written what I read out just before as part of my undergraduate writing. I could never have written something which said, you know, fuck you a million times. But what enabled me to sort of question sort of show don't tell really was in Australia there's an annual writers festival called the National Young Writers Festival, and you know it's very different from any literary festival that I'd attended up to that time. It was included, its vision of literature was quite broad and included zines and comics and hip hop and spoken word, and so I was exposed to a much larger variety of literature than I'd been exposed to in my undergraduate degree, which was pretty much fiction, poetry, literary journals. And as a result of that, the things I was finding in zines, for example, like rants, and you know, in hip hop, you know, one can brag about oneself, but meanwhile, the sort of depersonalized sort of, you know, exhortation to sort of depersonalize yourself that's, you know, born out sort of show don't tell didn't really accord with that. So I kind of was able to question the teachings of my undergraduate degree.
Well, I'll just say, for me, reading a children's, it's very different from how I normally read my work, because I usually write fiction for adults. But, you know, when I read my book out loud, I'm thinking both as a parent who's read a million bedtime stories, but also I'm a teacher. I teach high school, so I think mine is kind of a combination of teacher voice and mom reading bedtime story voice, I think. That's what I'm going for.
We can also ask a new question.
I don't know, for me, I guess, I figure my stuff is so weird, it needs like a sort of stark white background to live against. Otherwise it gets too weird. Like it would just be too much weird. So the minimalism helps usher it along.
I have a background in theater, so that's why I was yelling. And then I also hate poetry voice, and I hate spoken word. I fucking hate spoken word voice. No offense if you're out there, but it's like it's just so reductive and gross, and like it's like mimetic of itself and self-referential. So I try not to do that unless I really want to do that. So that's where it comes from.
Nice. Anyone have another question? Yes.
Me?
Yes.
I'm just wondering if there's any particular poets or performers that you guys have been, like, been inspired by or modeled your work after as you develop as artists.
Miss Piggy.
I'm totally obsessed with your teacher Miranda Mellis's entire family, are a big inspiration to me. I went out to multiple meals with her grandmother. I'll start with her grandmother, who would get me to eat dairy even though I'm totally allergic and have asthma attacks from it, but she'd be like, honey, try the bread pudding. And so I would. And I went to a movie with her and she screamed at the men in the movie the entire time. Like, what a putz, don't do that. So her grandmother, totally awesome. And then her mom was like this totally inventive, radical theater person, actor. who basically invented agitprop theater in the United States. And then her dad is a radical lawyer for, he was Judy Berry's lawyer, the environmental activist, and Fred Hampton in Chicago, the Black Panther that died well before he should have. And then her sister, Bernadine Mellis, is this filmmaker, and you should look up her films, Redbird Films. And then Miranda, I met like 25 years ago, maybe, and she was swinging from a trapeze, doing tricks on a trapeze, and is a musician, and is a writer.
I'm also inspired by Miranda, so very excited.
I'm usually inspired by fine artists, and like right now, well, this is not fine artist, that sounds shitty, but there's a conceptual performance maker in Europe called Jerome Bell, and his work is really inspiring to me with regards to words and identity.
I'm a high school teacher too, and I'm really inspired by teen slang.
I don't know, I find it a hard question to answer actually. I think more often, and as is sort of reflected in my book, I'm inspired not so much by writers, but by filmmakers, popular musicians. But my style is really weird, and in Australian literature too, Australia's my native country, and there's really nothing like my work in Australian literature that I've encountered, but also more broadly too. So I think in my sort of, and that can be it's been an isolating experience at times for me as a writer. Sometimes I have looked at sort of certain postmodern fiction writers, I guess if you want to call them that, people like Donald Barthelme and Robert Cooper. But really, my inspirations have been more in the realm of popular culture.
Seriously, I'm inspired by Miranda.
Okay.
Awesome. Another question? What? Oh, hi.
Hi. How do y'all feel about using humor to convey what would otherwise be like serious messages? You guys will arrive there, whether it's through accent or not.
Too soon, man. Too soon.
Well, I mean, I think I feel like I have a lot to say about that topic because so somebody I identify as like a fat woman of color, and I grew up kind of like probably a lower middle class or upper working class, sort of raised by Mexican immigrants, and humor is a sign of resiliency. I think there's a lot of different ways in which people metabolize really fucking awful experiences. And I think that for me, humor indicates this very strong, it indicates this strength, this ability to take something that's so awful and turn it into a pearl, right? And that's for me, that's labor. That's this invisible, often invisibilized emotional labor that marginalized people do all the time for each other and for other people too.
I'm a drag queen. I have a weekly show, and that means I'm emceeing weekly, and for 5 years I've been doing this every week. So it's taught me a lot about spectacle and entertainment as entry points to more complicated and challenging ideas. And so humor is one of those ways of, for me, it's about straight up manipulation of an audience and opening them to darker or more complex or nuanced things that they wouldn't approach otherwise. But also there was this joke that Miriam told yesterday, right?
Oh, sure.
So we stopped at the Shell station. It kind of relates to what you said about resiliency, and I feel like as a faggot, I said faggot the other day, where were we? At Eugene?
Yeah. Eugene, yeah.
I just called myself a faggot, and the room went cold. They were like, oh, you can't use that word. And I was like, fuck you, I'm a faggot. Let's get used to it, people. So, this resiliency thing too, I think is really important in the faggot, specifically faggot circles, and like we went to a Shell station the other day, and they didn't have any bathroom, and Miriam was like, oh, they looked at us like they knew we were queer. It was just AIDS prevention. And I thought that was like the most genius way of talking about AIDS. It was like, we can't use the toilet because we look queer and thusly we have AIDS. It's hilarious. So. It's afternoon, we can make AIDS jokes, right?
I think humor is a form of affection too. Like it's a way of loving somebody. Like I use a lot of humor in my classroom, but it's kind of mean humor. But like we can go mean because we love each other. Like I wouldn't be that mean if I didn't really like you. You know? And so I use cruelty as a form of love.
I totally agree with that in the sense that, I mean, I use a lot of parody in my work, and I think the sort of intent for humour, including parody, is quite broad, and it can sort of span from like being sort of showing reverence and sort of affection as well to ridicule. I think that for me, humour is about sort of reversal of expectation, which is something I've always really enjoyed. And I also have been really interested in sort of, like I said, having been sort of schooled in this sort of into sort of adopting a very sort of restrained sort of form of writing, the sort of excesses of humour sort of interest me. So even though I might be delivering in a sort of rather deadpan style, but you know, just saying fuck you a number of times is sort of, you know, very appealing.
And I'll just say, I mean, the children's book is not particularly humorous, but in terms of kind of using an unexpected medium to translate a much deeper, complicated message, it's a very political, to some degree, subversive children's book. And I like using the format of children's literature and the kind of bright, bold illustrations to convey some messages that you're not usually finding in children's literature. We define the KKK in the first sentence of the book, which is not what you normally get when you open a children's book. So it's been exciting to kind of be able to deliver some powerful messages in a pretty unexpected medium.
I just want to add though that I feel that sometimes I have been asked about the use of humour in my work, and I think people can tend to frame it in terms of saying, you know, is humour a really good vehicle for delivering, you know, an unpalatable message in a palatable way? And I completely disagree, because I think actually that humour can often be unpalatable.
I wanted to add something too. I'm glad you had an addendum. So I was thinking also for me, like for diet culture, it's like shifting the gaze, kind of what you were talking about, where it's like, you know, I'm so used to, as a fat person, being the point of humor, right? Like I'm just fat people are just inherently funny. The joke is that you're fat. And to kind of like literally distance myself from something so absurd, like a notion that human beings just being human beings is funny, or that somebody would believe that like praying makes you want to have fewer cookies. Like I sort of feel like, you know, oddly that system is completely normalized, and the system of bigotry is invisibilized through that. And so for me, it's like to take a step back and just sort of make fun of it and to shift the gaze and to really just, you know, show it for the absurd thing that it is. Because it's fucking hilarious. Like, I mean, everything that I just told you is true. and yet, it's like, it's completely absurd. And like, it's through the performance of it as absurd that is understood. Because we believe in, and we believe in and internalize all kinds of absurd things all the time. But if we take the space to like, take a step back, it really shows itself to be this stupid thing that just makes no sense.
Also, I personally feel like I have a really low tolerance for sincerity, and I think that's actually.
He's allergic to it.
I fucking hate it, but I think it's because there's sincerity doesn't actually, to me, often doesn't read as nuanced. It reads as like, I have this big feeling about this. I like when there's humor in there because there is nuance and there's potential for contradiction or complexity and disagreement within itself. And I believe that our realities are more nuanced than just like, whatever, that's not.
That makes me want to be so sincere with you all the time.
I think, yeah, we have room for a few more questions actually, if anybody has anything they want to throw out there.
So my sister's a grade school teacher, and we often talk about, certain things that could be brought up in class. And I sent her like an interesting article, but she oftentimes tells me she's not sure that certain things should be put in a classroom if it's safe or not. And I was curious how your children's book has been received by parents and the schools that maybe you've read it to.
That's a great question. It's been received incredibly well, way better than I think we expected. I knew that it would be appealing to a particular audience of progressive, kind of feminist parents and educators, but it's gotten a lot of kind of really mainstream attention and reviews, and all of which have been incredibly positive. And there was an article about it on Yahoo Beauty, of all places, and that's because it was Yahoo. It was a great article. It was super wonderful, but that's where we got the most trolls, So then we definitely got the Yahoo troll comments of women should not go to college, and Angela Davis is a murderer, kind of really predictable stuff. But outside of that, it's been remarkably.
I'm going to use this for toilet paper.
Yeah, that was a good one. I was we've made it. The trolls have arrived. But it's, I think that young people can handle so much more than we think. And I say that as someone who just whisked my daughter out of the room. But there's a fine line, right? But in terms of talking to them directly about our history of racism and classism and ableism and sexism, and because it all boils down to fairness and unfairness and kindness and love, and these concepts that all children understand from a very early age. And I think, to me, the key about bringing those things into a classroom or into conversations with young people is just to be really direct with them. So, and I say that out of having many conversations with my own daughter about, why did mom go to a Black Lives Matter protest, and what does that mean that it says Black Lives Matter? And we talk about it very directly, and it's hard. And if you've been around young children, if you have young children, you know the feeling of when your 5-year-old suddenly asks, am I gonna die? And you're just so kids are always asking hard questions, and it's our baggage that we have around them that dictates how we're going to talk to them about it. And if you just explain things directly, I think that they can really handle it. So all that is to say, I've been really pleasantly surprised at how well teachers are reacting. I was just in a classroom of 4th graders in Portland, and going through all the different women, and it includes Kate Bornstein, who's transgender, and I tell the classroom, this is Kate Bornstein. She was born with a male body, but she feels like a woman, and that's how she lives her life, and the kids are just cool. So far, so good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Are any of you any other type of artist? Is this your only type of art, or do you have another expressive way of showing who you are?
I do photography too. Yeah, but I Photoshop my face onto other people's faces. My name's Miriam, but I did a series called Me-Riam, and so I became everybody. Every fun cultural reference that excited me. I became Yoda, I became Angelina Jolie, whoever I wanted. Many Miriams. The Miriams are out. I had a zine collection of it. But yeah, I do photography. And then you do drag.
I do drag and contemporary performance and contemporary dance. Yeah.
I do memoir. I edited a book called Hot and Heavy, Fierce Fat Girls on Life, Love, and Fashion. Woo! So yeah, so mostly memoir actually.
I've specialised in creative writing and specifically fiction, but I've always sort of seen myself as being an artist with that fiction writing is my primary practice. So I've done a lot of festival curation and programming in Australia, and worked in different art forms, for those festivals, working with hip hop artists and other art forms. kind of was really interested in one stage after writing my first book in expanding the sort of performance element of my practice, but then I ended up ironically writing, which I'm still writing, this very dense sort of novel, but it incorporates sort of scholarly content as well as, I suppose, creative content. And so I guess I'm sort of interested in those sorts of hybridities, actually. I think really I have this sort of very sort of cross art form sensibility, and you know, I'm sort of a bit of a collarist at heart, and I sort of work in all these different sorts of materials, but fiction is my primary mode.
And I also write fiction. I'm writing a novel for grown-ups. I wrote one of the 33 1/3 books, if you know this series of small books about different albums. I wrote one about Rid of Me, the PJ Harvey album. And I've done, and I also worked as an editor as well. So I worked with Miranda and Ellis in the Encyclopedia Project, and helped my students edit their literary journals. And yeah, I also, like I said, I teach high school as well. So the fine art of high school teaching and the fine, messy art of parenting, I am also engaged in.
Any other questions? I think we're on for 2 more. Okay, wait, where? I see someone.
There's one there,
Oh,
one there.
hi. Yes.
The wares?
How much are
How much
the
are they?
wares?
It's the last day.
They range from $2 to $16.
$1.
$1 and $1 to $16.
$1 for stickers.
What are you interested
there's
in?
so much stuff there.
Make an offer.
Yeah, most of the books are between, I think, like
I will give you a
10
free
and
button.
16.
Just them. You can come choose one in a little bit.
There was, someone back there.
Are you guys optimistic or pessimistic about women's and LGBT issues in the coming future?
I have to be optimistic because I'm holding a small child on my lap.
She was optimistic.
Yeah, look how optimistic the future is.
I'm so optimistic.
Yeah, I am. Honestly, this is going to be, Micah, plug your ears because this is actually sincere. No, but I spend an inordinate amount of time around people under the age of 20, both my own children and the high school students that I work with and middle school students that I see. It actually does make me hopeful because, it's a small cross-section of the vast world, but being around young people makes me actually really optimistic, gives me a lot of hope. The kids I get to work with, granted I'm in the Bay Area, so it's a magical little progressive place, but the kids I work with are so fierce and so conscious and so creative and really, really, really smart. And that makes me feel very optimistic. I have 15-year-olds having super nuanced conversations about their own gender identity and about rape culture, and they like really good music. I don't know. I think the future's good. You guys are...
Well,
they're exhausted.
My default kind of feeling about these sorts of things is really ambivalence, I suppose. Maybe I am speaking also to an Australian political context as well. I think I see a lot of further fracturing of political debates around LGBT rights. The sort of mainstreaming of gay and lesbian rights that are tied to marriage rights, for example. I think the whole discourse of equality is problematic, and it's difficult sometimes in Australia where there's not same-sex marriages does not exist in Australia, so that has monopolised the debate on LGBT rights, which is really quite problematic when you don't have other rights in terms of for example, employment protection and a seat at the table, sort of based on discourse of equality, when in some ways you want to just, kick the whole damn fucking table over. At the same time, I'm married. So I think there's one finds oneself sort of really deeply implicated in unable to, step out from having a stake in all of these sorts of issues. I guess I will put on the sincere hat for a moment, just a moment, to say that I do think that hopefully that this splintering of different sorts of debates might, I hope that in all of that people can find their own sort of micro communities in which they can, seek support, and that, it kind of harks back to what Virgie was talking about really in terms of sort of self-help and sort of that encourages victim blaming narratives. The sort of It Gets Better campaign, I think, is quite pernicious in its own way, because it sort of encourages this sort of very individualistic sort of notion that you as an individual can sort of transcend and sort of master all, the sort of burdens that society has sort of, heaped upon you, all these sort of systemic sort of problems, which is, impossible. But at the same time, I think that activism sort of, in my opinion, sort of the sort of powerful and kind of forms of activism that sort of really sort of make and realistic sort of forms of activism are always kind of really micro forms of activism, and I hope that those forms, and I feel that those forms will continue to sort of thrive, but there are deep systemic larger issues that, those margins take a long, long time to shift, if ever.
Yeah, actually that dovetails really well into some. Yeah, I'm gonna do it. Into like something that I was thinking, which was kind of like I think that there's like this notion of like a forward-moving progress that is very Western, and like that there's kind of this inevitable like that the West is spearheading, and that this sort of like shift is inevitable, and that we're all heading in this direction. And I think for me, it's much more like, especially as somebody who's interfaced so intensely with future-oriented narratives like dieting, it's kind of like really intense for me to think about, some grander narrative that I'm like a part of maybe. And for me, it really is about focusing the energy and resources I have on the community, my community, who I want to see survive and do well and do amazing things. So yeah.
I do tend to be optimistic, but also guarded in a guarded optimism, because I think that being like eternally optimistic can silence people that are having a really shitty time, and there's a whole lot of people still having a really shitty time. But kind of going back to the question about our book, I have a daughter who's in the 2nd grade, and her teacher uses our book, has like totally like jumped on writing all this curriculum around it, and had the 2nd graders write about rad American women that they thought were awesome, and 4 of the kids in the class wrote about Jazz Jennings. Do you know who Jazz Jennings is? She's a transgender. How old is she, Kate? She's 14.
We have her children's book.
Yeah, and she's written a book, and so there's optimism, definitely there with our youngins. And I'm a high school teacher. I've taught for 20 years, and definitely I've seen a shift around embracing feminism. Like Kate and I have done a lot of local events, and a lot of the young boys that I work with have volunteered and been really excited about our book, and definitely like are proud feminists and claim that, and are taking responsibility around not raping women and talking about it, and talking to other men and boys when they hear something that is wrong. So I feel totally optimistic about that.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question if anybody has a final wrap-up question. Or we can cede this time to shopping.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming out this afternoon. If you have a chance to come out tonight to the library and see the show, I'll be much more inappropriate.